Ankemat, Heteperu, welcome back to Kemetic Tuesdays. Today, we're going to talk about a lot. I want consider this one somewhat of a continuation of the session I did on Passover, where I'm digging deeper into the importance of Ausar or Osiris as it pertains to the Christ figure itself and the real areas of dominion. So if you haven't had a chance to check that one out, be sure to go listen to that one before or after you listen to this one. It gives a bit more context to some of the things that I'm going to be sharing here. Now, just to start off, one of the things that I believe, based on my own studies, intuition, so on and so forth, is that in Kemeticism, when we're talking about the Duat, we're not actually talking about the underworld as the actual land of the dead or some world under our own. The reason why is that the journey typically starts in the heavens, and what's under heaven is the earth. But not only are we talking about the earth as the underworld, I've said multiple times before that I believe that the Duat is actually the quantum realm or the quantum grid itself. And that plays a huge role in the importance of Asar or Osiris. So, in talking about Asar, right? And the Duat. So the Duat, or this place of judgment, right? Remember, they judge the heart in the Duat before the scales of Ma'at. Ma'at is a symbol of universal balance and harmony. Interesting. And the organ that's used to weigh it is the heart. Now, you can look at that in a way to say, well, God knows my heart, or it's what's inside the heart that counts. And I'm not going to dismiss that. What I'll encourage us to do is look a little bit deeper. When we look a little bit deeper, we'll see that the heart is the largest electromagnetic organ in the physical body. And that gives a bit more scientific credibility to the idea of as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What the heart does is that it tells the rest of you what to be. So if the heart is off, the rest of the body is off. The heart tells the rest of the body what to be. So if the heart is wicked, all of you is wicked. If the heart is righteous, all of you is righteous. Which is why if they take that heart and they measure it against the scales of Ma'at, against the feather of Ma'at, if the heart is Ma'at, that person is Ma'at. And they're judging them by their frequency is something I want to emphasize. So when we look at Asar, right, the name Asar, right, the name Asar itself just means the place of the eye, okay, the dark socket. One of the many names of Asar is the Great Black One, not just referencing the melanated people of that time, not just referencing fertile soil, because he does represent fertility in the sense of agriculture. That is an aspect of Asar. So not to dismiss those, but let's look a little bit deeper. Why is his name, why is one of his titles the Great Black One? Well, one of the concepts of the soul in the Kemetic culture, there are, let's just say, about 9 different parts of the body or 9 different parts of the soul. One of them is the shadow. And I find this interesting. So you have the shadow, which isn't just like your physical shadow, the absence of light that you leave on the ground. No, the shadow, even the fact that they depict it that way, I find interesting, right? The shadow is typically seen as something black. Now, when you look in the ancient world, black was still used for the same reason that we use it today, in that it absorbs light, it absorbs heat. It's an absorber. To the point where they would make their umbrellas as dark as possible, typically black, in order to absorb the light and keep them safe from the shade. So you were hiding yourself under the shade to keep you safe from the light, to keep you safe from the heat. In a way, melanin in our skin kind of acts as a similar barrier. Now, the cool thing about that, you're looking at the absorbing properties of the color black being used for shade, Okay. Absorbing light, using it for shade, a form of protection from radiation. What if I told you that the shadow in this form really represents the subatomic? And let me express myself a little bit more, right? You're dealing with the fact that we have a spectrum of light and the majority of it is unseen. Typically, when you can't see something, you see black. It's not that there is nothing there, it's just that it's beyond comprehension is a bigger picture. You have a large spectrum of light. The only thing that we can physically see is the smallest aspect of that, which goes between the colors of red to violet. And then after that, we can only interpret and we can only feel, and we have to build sensors in order to observe them in any capacity, which means to tell you that there's more happening than we're aware of, just because our physical eyes that we're trained to live from are not able to see it. But what if I told you that there was a part of your identity, a part of your anatomy that was made for that world? That would be your shadow. And that is the dimension, right, where Ausar gets his name, the Great Black One, or the Lord of the Black, because he's talking about the subatomic realm, which is the same as the quantum realm. It's under the world that we're used to seeing. But not only is it just as powerful, it's actually more powerful. That which happens in the unseen influences the seen. That which happens in the subatomic influences the atomic and then moves its way into the visible spectrum. This is something that we recognize in the secular world as string theory. The idea that we're experiencing the movement of smaller particles, string-like particles, in an unseen realm that influence the world around us. Not just minuscule, microscopic, atomic level structures, but massive to the point where they're influencing the flow of the universe itself. They just exist in such a realm or on such a frequency that we can't perceive them with the naked eye, but the influence of them is felt throughout all of the world. And we're going to revisit that. But what we're dealing with here, not only, right, black, it absorbs light. It absorbs light, which means you're getting pulled into a void for the most part. It's so much, it's so dense, it's so packed. Think of a black hole. It's so much there that it looks as if nothing's there. And we usually depict and experience nothing as black. But it's actually the presence of a massive amount of information. The more substance, the more mass that's there, the darker and more void the area appears. Not that it is, but it appears that way. So this is a layout of the kingdom of Ausar. This is the kingdom of Christ. It's the subatomic realm. In fact, Ptah, who in his own way represents the subatomic world, being an aspect of Ausar, being the same entity, just a different facet of Ausar, that's his domain as well. We're looking at the kingdom of Christ. In fact, the Pertim Heru, or the book of resurrection, book of life, book of the dead, it's talking about and really laying out the structure of Ausar's kingdom. And I came across some verses, and many of you have heard me quote some of this before, where there's some cool stuff if you're paying attention. One of my favorite verses is where he says, "Who is this whose heavens are a fire and whose walls are made of living serpents and whose floors are made of waters, streams of waters? Who is this?" This is Ausar. This is Osiris. This is Christ. And one of the questions that I've had, and one of the coolest parts of that verse, isn't just the walking on water aspect of the floor of his kingdom being made of water. That's powerful. Not just that the ceiling is made of fire, that's powerful too, but the fact that the walls are made of serpents. What is the importance of serpents? Well, in ancient times, and even in the Bible, serpents are representative of wisdom, of insight, of vision, of skill, and of mastery. What about the serpent? In Genesis, you're making it sound like that's a good thing. Well, even your Bible says to be wise as serpents, so it does not deny the wisdom of the serpent. But let's talk about very briefly the story of Genesis. The story of Genesis does us a disservice in the English translations that we have. An example of this is that serpent shouldn't even be the word serpent. That would almost be a nickname instead of a translation. The word used there is Nakash, which means the goldsmith, the craftsman, the maker. And it even comes from a root word, which means the brilliant one or the shining one. It's talking about the actual creator of man, the actual sculptor, the craftsman. It's talking about Ausar. It's talking about Christ. The serpent in the garden was Yeshua. It was Christ. It was Ausar. In the Sumerian culture, that is Enki. That is Ea, right? You're talking about the craftsman, the brilliant one. And I guess you could say the word serpent isn't saying that there was an actual serpent figure there, a humanoid serpent interacting with them, or a snake, just some regular snake just so happened to be on a tree. No. You're looking at a fragment of a story told from a very specific angle. The oldest version of that story you can find in the Sumerian cultures. And it gives a lot more backing to it. It gives a lot more context to the rest of the story. The emphasis of that is that serpents represent wisdom, but they also represent energy. One of my other beliefs and one of my other understandings is that even in the Kemetic culture, all the serpents represent energy, just as they do in the Indian culture, in the Hindu culture. They represent forms of energy. Apep, the enemy of Ra, is depicted as this massive serpent, right? If serpents represent energy, I found this interesting, right? Because you have to kind of take the Kemetic culture and treat it as though it is an African culture, which it is. If I wanted to depict energy and frequency and vibration, and I'm observing nature, and I take a pebble or a rock and I throw it into a body of water and I watch the ripples, don't the ripples look like a serpent coiled? Right. So then if I want to say I want to deal with the energy or the frequency of the whole world, I then just depict it as a much bigger snake. And that's where we get Apophis or a pep. It's not really saying that in the past there used to be this massive serpent that was killing and eating everything. That's not really the point. A pep represents energy, represents the carnal energy, the frequency of the world. This is why Ra battles against him every day. It's being in the world and not of the world, maintaining a heavenly mentality while in a carnal world. It's a battle against letting outside influences change your interior is a better picture. And a pep representing all the energy of the world, it does not go away. You learn how to become immune, right? But snakes represent energy. Snakes represent frequency. Snakes represent wisdom and information. Well, that sounds familiar to anyone who's ever really given the Hindu culture a look. In that, well, the obvious first thing that comes to mind is Kundalini, the idea that there's a coiled up serpent of energy at the base of the spine, and they have practices of trying to awaken it. Now, that's not necessarily my practice. I don't teach that. I have issues with the modalities. I actually believe it's somewhat rebellious in nature. Not that the people who are using it are rebellious, but just that the structure of it is. Why is that? Because you're dealing with a pep. It's at the base of the spine. It's at the lowest chakra, meaning it's actually harnessing all of the survival instinct, all of the corruption of that individual really makes up the bulk of that energy, which means it's not actually helpful until it's transformed. So even in that regard, I teach a process of descension rather than ascension, in that I'm not trying to bring earth to heaven. I'm trying to bring heaven to earth. This is a real Christhood paradigm. It's bringing more of heaven into the earth plane. So it would be the eagle comes down to grab the serpent and then bring it back up, rather than the serpent rising in ranks and ruling from the throne. That actually sounds a little familiar in different mythos. But either you've heard, so Kundalini is usually the most popular thing someone would hear about. But on the flip side, you also have the Nagas, which are depicted as humanoid serpent figures, serpentine entities. So you're looking at serpentine entities like this, right? Now, am I saying, okay, so let's talk about this, the Nagas, right? In the Kemetic culture, you have the Wajet, which is, or the Uraid, which is pretty much the same thing. It's a serpent representing wisdom. But let's go a bit deeper. Let's go a bit deeper. I'm trying to show y'all something. So the Nagas are serpentine figures in the Hindu culture, which in many ways represent or act as embodiments or teachers of high energy practices and wisdom. They're stewards of wisdom and stewards of energy and power. Okay, so this sounds similar, right? You have serpents being used in a wise role, in an energetic role. What's really going on here? Even the nature of the Nagas in the Hindu culture sounds very familiar, in that they're described as living undisturbed away from humanity, and that they don't like to be disturbed. They live in burrows, underground tunnels. These energy snakes moving in places where humanity would otherwise not see them. Oh, we're talking about string theory. Oh, we're talking about the movement of energy in serpentine-like patterns that's releasing frequencies affecting the world around. Got you. That sounds very familiar. Even in the Australian culture, when they're talking about the rainbow serpent who buries himself underground and moves around, causing different events to take place, serpents are used in the same way in pretty much every culture. But what's the importance with Ausar? He says, my walls are made of serpents, of living serpents, which means his domain is the Naga sphere. He's the Lord of the Nagas. Wait, who's the Lord of the Nagas in Hindu culture? Yes, I'm bridging Hinduism into this. Who's the Lord of the Nagas? Well, you have Vasuki, Nagaraj, the king of the Nagas. Vasuki is in Hindu culture presented as the Lord of the Nagas, the king of the Nagas. But he has an older brother named Shisha, who is also in many ways considered the Lord of the Nagas, and he acts as the bed of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is also another aspect of Ausar or Yeshua or Christhood in total. In fact, the name Vishnu itself means the all-pervasive one, the all that is in all. It's the all that's a part of everything. It's the unseen between everything. Well, that sounds a little familiar to the word within all flesh. Not only that, but one of his avatars, Krishna, the name Krishna means the black one. Again, coming back to this subatomic total, this shadow form, bearing all the information. It's a living black hole is kind of the idea that you get, and it is the Lord of the quantum realm. The Lord of the subatomic plane is what you're dealing with here. My walls are made of living serpents. Not only are we talking about Nagas as wisdom teachers or imparters of energy, but we're also dealing with the simple fact that he's talking about energy being under his control to such an extent that he decorates with it. It's the quantum realm, which is the master of the electromagnetic grid. This is Ausar, this is Christ, this is Vishnu, all dealing with this archetype of dominion, ruling the seen from the unseen, being a part and being the force behind everything. This is why he's the judge, is because even when, let's double back, let's go really far back into something I mentioned earlier with the Duat representing the quantum realm, not representing just the land of the dead, right? Remember, Ausar rules the Duat, and it's in that place that he judges. That's where the judgment seat of Christ is. I've said this before, I'll say it again. There is no future judgment day. Judgment day is every day because your heart is forever judged. Reaping and sowing is something that you do every single day. The frequency of your heart is speaking to the world around you, and you receive that back in abundance every single day. And it's Ausar who runs that. Because his walls are made of serpents, which means he feels the vibration of everything happening. He's connected to everything. That reminds me of Loki from the recent Marvel TV show, the Marvel show, right? How at the end, he's holding all the timelines. He's behind the scenes of what everyone can actually experience. Holding all the timelines, holding all the connections to himself. Feeling every timeline, feeling every event, connected to it all. This is a perfect picture of the Duat. This is a perfect picture of the quantum realm. This is a perfect picture of the throne of Christ, of the throne of Ausar in the Duat. Now let's talk about Nagas a little bit more, because I find that as an interesting topic. Nagas and string theory is the same concept. Don't get dense on me. They're talking about the same thing. Pockets of energy moving in unseen ways that resembles a somewhat serpentine-like pattern, and it affects the world around us. It moves in an unseen world. This is the same concept. So whether you believe that they can manifest in visible form or not, that's up for debate. But the existence of them is easy, right? They called them serpents. We just call them strings. It's not really a complicated difference. It's not like we had some sophisticated word for string theory. It's just a string. They chose to say serpents because they were tracking the movement. They said, hey, energy is moving in a serpentine-like pattern. It's even somewhat taboo in Hindu culture to experience a Naga, to see a Naga. That's because they live underground. They live in the hidden world, which means the only way you're seeing them is if they are being disturbed. Wait a minute. You're dealing with, the only time you see it is if it's being disturbed, which means when it's undisturbed, you do not see them. You're looking at the repercussions of breaking Ma'at. You're looking at the repercussions of living outside of the flow of the spirit, outside of the ideologies of Christhood, living outside of the flow of nature. You're bumping against natural flows of energy, and it's wreaking havoc. What if I told you this is what's really going on in the world that we're living in now, that because of how spiritually distant we've become, spiritually distant, spiritually ignorant, that we're accidentally bumping into pockets of energy, and the effects of that energy are tearing our civilization apart because we cannot see them. We're tripping landlines, we're tripping wires, booby traps all the time. And I believe this is a beautiful design, in that if you're living the right way, you don't interrupt them, you don't disturb them. If you're living out of harmony, if you're living in disarray, you're bumping into strings, you're bumping into waves, you're bumping into Nagas. So you're feeling constricted, you're feeling bitten, you're feeling poisoned. They're lashing out because you instigated and initiated an attack on their territory. When undisturbed, they just live, they just rest and do what they do. So again, just to summarize some of these ideas, Ausar is the Lord of the Duat. His name, or his title, which means the Great Black One. The Great Black One represents the void, or the mass, the infinite mass of energy, the infinite mass of information, the infinite mass of matter, meaning I am everywhere. I am connected to everything. Everything is a part of me. I'm so much that you can't perceive me. It's kind of the idea behind it. Wait a minute. The name Ausar, the place of the eye. Wait a minute. I'll show you where Ausar is. So here's a depiction of Ausar sitting on his throne. And here we have Ausar sitting on his throne. These are the 12 cranial nerves in the brain. This is the place of Ausar. This is the judgment seat of Christ in another facet. It's from this area that the rest of your body, connected by strings, receives its instructions from an unseen source. Should there be any damage to this place, everything else in the body loses its function. It can't operate properly without its king being present and without this throne being set up. Now, this area of the brain is not far from the pineal gland, which is the eye. It was called the first eye. So people often have asked me questions on my thoughts on the third eye, or and my belief is this, right? The Bible says, if thine eye be single, your whole body will be full of life. So I'll say this. I agree with the Christians. I do have a problem with third eye. I think it's demonic. I think it's carnal. Let's be dramatic. First eye, on the other hand, I do not. Now, what am I talking about? If that eye, your pineal gland, is first, you're living in order. The reason it's called the first eye is because it's the first eye form. You gain that one before you gain the rest. And it's due to our dependency on our later two eyes that we lose connection with the one on the inside of our head. Now, it's the one on the inside of our head which gives us the ability to view and experience the other frequencies of light that the two external eyes miss out on. Meaning you have an eye on the inside of your head surrounded by darkness. In the kingdom of Ausar, right here in the judgment seat of Christ. So that's why it's called the eye of Christ, the eye of Heru, the eye of Ausar, because it's an all-seeing eye. It sees everything. It's not limited by the perception of the two external eyes. It has an eye that sees all things because it views the forces around it on an energetic level, on a frequency level. Quantum vision. No, it doesn't allow you to see in the spirit. It allows you to see the unseen. So this is why the pharaohs would wear the cobra on their foreheads, parallel with the pineal gland, not just representing some level of mastery of what the Hindus would call kundalini, but just from a Kemetic perspective. But it was a symbol of dominion in that they had gained mastery over their internal structure of energy, and they had mastered their internal to the point where the internal could protect them externally. The Uraeus or the Wajet was seen as a protector of the pharaoh. It was a protector, but it's a Naga, it's a serpent, it's a snake. That means that which was on the inside has been connected with and embraced to the point where it can come out and defend. So it's defending the mind from attacks, but not just the mind, right? It's protecting the real seat of government, which is the seat of Ausar within the head, within the brain, those 12 cranial nerves. It's protecting the important throne, not necessarily the external throne. So not only that, but it represents some level of mastery or dominion or connection with the unseen world, with the quantum world. At this point, the pharaoh is almost seen as an extension or an avatar, an emanation of Ausar. In the same way Ausar is ruling the unseen within, the pharaoh is ruling the visual. And you could even say that the Ure on the front is acting as an agent of Ausar, acting as an emissary, an apostle for the kingdom within. And just because we're looking at it, what about the vulture head next to it? The vulture represents that which is above, represents the heavens. So you're looking at the higher realms and the unseen realms, the heavens above and the underworld of the subatomic world beneath. The pharaoh is claiming connection with both. The conscious and the subconscious, the atomic and the subatomic, the heavens and the earth, connection and authority with both. This is a position of authority you gain in Christ. So when you begin to function as Ausar, as Christ, you then begin to master the same dimensions of Christ. Remember, his kingdom is the subconscious. He is the Lord of the Black. It's the subconscious. It's the subatomic. It's the unseen things that he rules. The unseen thing is the thing with more authority. It's harder because it causes you to draw on your unseen senses, your unseen organs, your unseen connectors. Learning to rely on the parts of yourself that you might have insecurities in order to gain mastery and dominion. This is Ausar. This is Christ. This is you. Learning to govern yourself, learning to govern the world around you as a byproduct. If you can master yourself, the world around you lines up. Why is that? Because you reap what you sow. When the internal world is in harmony, the world around you can only ever give you that same harmony back. Hey, learning how to function with the Duat, the unseen world, the quantum realm, paying more attention to the state of your heart. See, your actions do not matter in the unseen world. The frequency that you are of matters in the unseen world. What does that mean? It means your true intentions, your underlying motives matter more than the actions that end up manifesting. It is for this reason that they use wine so much in myth. I'm going to do another session on that, but for this reason, wine was seen almost as a truth serum. In that when a person was under the influence, they would do whatever it is that they actually wanted to do. The real them, the unseen them would bring itself to the surface. It would expose who they were on the inside. If your heart is righteous, when you lose control, you don't do unrighteous things. But when you're simply subdued by the fear of hell, the fear of another, the fear of social constructs, in a moment where you're left to your subconscious devices, the real you shows up because your subconscious is who you really are. So y'all, thank you for joining me today. This has been great. Please leave some questions down below. Let me know what other sessions you'd like for me to do for Kemetic Tuesday. As usual, check out the website. I have a mentorship course coming up in about a week, this upcoming Sunday. So if that's something you want to participate in, enrollment's available there. As far as also Patreon, my books, I have a few things coming out. Stay tuned. But until next time, y'all be blessed. Ankwaz Jed, Ankunjab Seneb.